Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ismail Kyaze. I'm a student of UMI studying a Master's in Business Administration. Today, we are here with my colleague right here next to me, who is going to introduce himself shortly to present a group coursework which we have worked on under public-private partnerships. We are a group of 2 members, and I will let my colleague introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Ismail. My name's Esiat Okurut, student registration number 18, MBA Kila 0065. Together with my colleague, we've put a lot of efforts to produce this coursework. Thank you.
Yeah, for emphasis purposes, my name is Ismail Kyaze again. My registration number is 18, MBA Kla 0069. The coursework we are handling is a brief on unsolicited proposals in public-private partnerships. It is divided into majorly 3 sections. First section is the background. The second is the overview of the PPP law of Uganda. And the third is the experiences from different countries. And then we will conclude with recommendations to the PPP and provide the references. I will handle half of the section. My colleague will handle the rest of the sections to complete the whole coursework.
Thank you, Ismail. We can proceed.
The background of this coursework is as follows. This brief is based on the World Bank review of the experiences regarding unsolicited proposals. The reviews were done in many countries across the world, including Kenya, Tanzania, Senegal, India, Philippines, Colombia, Jamaica, Nigeria, Uganda, among many others. The purpose of the brief is to provide information to assist the PPP Unit of Uganda in the development of a guideline for management of USPs in Uganda. I will start off with the basics, the definition of USP. Traditionally, governments involve the private sector in infrastructure development through public planning processes. In the case of a USP, a private entity reaches out to the public agents with a proposal of an infrastructure or service project without having received an explicit request or invitation from the government to do so. A USP is therefore an exception to the norm, where infrastructure projects are initiated by the public sector. USPs come into place for different reasons, which for purposes of this presentation I will call the motivations. There are 3 major motivations which we have looked at, and one of them is overcoming lack of public sector capacity. We note that the public sector does not have the total capacity to manage major infrastructure projects, and so there is a need through PPPs for the government to bring in the private sector to us to provide assistance with the capacity in terms of technical and financial. We see that countries including Kenya, Tanzania, Senegal typically rely on USP proponents to develop the projects, in return for which the USP proponents typically expect the projects to be awarded to them. The second motivation is harnessing private sector innovation and creativity. Now, we know that there is a lot of innovation in the private sector because we know that the private sector is driven by profit maximization, and therefore it ensures that it must be innovative and creative all the time. So the government taps into this innovation from the private sector through PPP projects. The third reason, much as it may sound negative, but it is a true fact. The enabling of corruption and nepotism to avoid competition is a motivation for USPs. This is a discussion that goes on and on and on. There are several allegations of corruption in a USP project, and despite their unproven nature in some countries, it indicates a strong perception of corruption and nepotism, and therefore this is a motivation for some USPs. I think it is important at this stage to tell you about the PPP law of Uganda. PPPs in Uganda are governed by the Public-Private Partnership Act 2005. According to the Act, 2015, I beg your pardon. According to the Act, a PPP project can be procured through either a competitive or a non-competitive process. Competitive processes include open bidding and restricted bidding, whereas non-competitive processes include direct procurement and unsolicited proposals. The law defines unsolicited proposals as those proposals for a PPP that is independently originated by the proposer of the USP and is prepared without supervision of the contracting authority. That is it about, in brief, that is what I can say about the PPP law of Uganda. I will now delve into the different country experiences where my colleague here will pick up at some point. Now, in Chile, Peru, Jamaica, New South Wales, Ghana, Tanzania, India, and USA, the state of Virginia, we observe that these countries have centralized their USP submission processes, either requiring a central agency to accept and process the USP, or allowing government departments to accept USPs but requiring the central unit to process and evaluate them. The benefit of this is allowing a single agency to accept and process USPs is that it only requires developing public sector capacity in one location. Countries like Colombia, Philippines, Italy, that have been observed to have decentralized USP submission processes appear to have experienced the greatest challenges, including managing and coordinating the flow of USPs and developing the required USP public sector capacity across government departments. Peru and Pennsylvania have been observed to have restricted time frames for USP submissions. Now, establishing a dedicated time window for the USP submissions prevents public officials from being distracted from their priorities and creates certainties for USP proponents. South Africa, Virginia, New South Wales, and Italy have minimum submission requirements. These are minimum bidding submission requirements. Minimum submission requirements which enhance the quality of proposals are observed in almost all USP frameworks which have been reviewed in this review and in all developed countries. Colombia, Chile, Ghana require that USPs pass through 2 stages with more stringent submission requirements at the second stage. This approach has advantages of both the public and private sectors. The public sector avoids investing significant time and effort in evaluating low-quality proposals, which eliminates at an early stage. And 2, USP proponents only decide to invest in drafting full proposals if the government has signaled an interest in the project. In Chile, for example, the Ministry of Public Works approves the public interest of the project concept during an initial presentation stage before reviewing the full proposal during the proposal stage. In the United States, we note that Virginia has instituted a USP review fee which would deter opportunistic and low-cost quality USPs and encourage USP proponents to meet submission requirements. Most governments which were reviewed use a two-stage procedure to evaluate USPs. This has advantages in terms of limiting the use of public and private resources to only those USPs that have been shown to provide value to the public agencies. Governments of Virginia and New South Wales use a two-stage evaluation procedure consisting of a preliminary evaluation followed by a detailed evaluation. At this stage, I want to pass over to my colleague Richard here to take you through the proceeding sections. I may come back in at the concluding sections later on. Richard, there you go.
Thank you very much, Ismail, for so far what you have presented. Like we've stated earlier on, I'm just continuing from where years so far ended. And basically, I'm looking at what happens in Colombia. For example, you find that public officials are hesitant to reject or accept USCs due to both the lack of clear procedures and the lack of empowerment of public sector officials, resulting in the USP laying redundant for many years until they are automatically rejected because the evaluation was or took a lot of time. Evaluation criteria therefore forms the bedrock of a USP evaluation process. Absence of a clear evaluation criteria result into pitfalls, including 1. Public agencies accepting projects that are not in the public interest. 2. A USP laying stagnant in the public system for years, not being accepted or rejected. And 3. We find that USP proponents submit USPs that may ultimately not meet the government requirements, draining public resources. Certainly, elements are common in the evaluation requirement across USP frameworks. Most governments require that USP projects align with the public sector overall objective priorities and plans. For instance, you find that in the USA, specifically in Virginia, the initial analysis or screening of the US project is known as a policy review, and the evaluation criteria are called the policy review criteria and compromises of a list of 8 elements which are very instrumental in ensuring that the process is critically observed. The extent to which a USP project must be original, not only the government priority projects list, largely depends on the government motivation for allowing USPs. Government are motivated to use or to obtain project concepts that the public agency was not able to define, typically to do or allow to refer to projects that are in government projects pipeline. Government motivated to accelerate the implementation of projects typically allow even or encourage USPs to refer to projects in the government pipeline of priorities. More than half of the governments require that USP be original, in other words, not already part of the government list of planned projects. Most of these countries are basically emerging markets with recent PP laws and include, for instance, we have Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, Niger, Nigeria, to mention but a few, and Uganda is inclusive in this list. We further see that several USP frameworks distinguish between originality of the project's idea, not in the government pipeline, and innovations, while some jurisdictions do not allow USP for projects that are already in the pipeline. and this is typically seen in South Africa. We see the National Treasury USP framework accepts USP forms that feature on the government list of priority projects only. In Latin America, for example, countries accept USPs in order to accelerate the implementation of public infrastructure projects. These countries include Peru and Colombia. Value for money is a key evaluation criteria that we observe in mature PPP markets, such as in Australia and in the United States, where specific value for money analysis is not conducted. Some governments may still require a strong economic rationale for implementing a USP. Governments that have greater PP experience may require that a USP clearly demonstrates value for money. For example, in Virginia, USA, and in New South Wales in Australia, a USP project must demonstrate value for money, although not specifically listing it as an evaluation criteria. Few governments have restrictions on government support for USPs, but most governments offer both financial and non-financial support. We see this very common in countries like Tanzania, Nigeria, Zambia, and Sri Lanka. Actually, these countries prohibit government support for USPs. In Colombia and Peru, however, they treat it differently. USPs that do not require government support differently. In Colombia, whether or not a USP requires government support affects the incentive mechanism during procurement, with a USP proponent earning a bonus of 3 to 10%. In addition, government support may never exceed 20% of the total investment cost of the project. In Peru, for example, whether or not a USP requires government support similarly affects all the USP procedures from evaluation criteria to project development and procurement. In addition to those discussed above, the evaluation steps and timeliness, therefore, is a need for a clear assignment of evaluation responsibilities. In Jamaica, for example, the PP unit evaluates the USP in consultation with the Minister of Finance and Planning. PP node, which is responsible for evaluating the physical implications of a USP. The overseeing entity is the cabinet, which makes the ultimate decision regarding whether to accept the USP for further negotiation. In Virginia, USA, although the VAP3 conducts the USP policy review, the public agency is responsible for the infrastructure development, such as the Virginia Department for Transportation and the Virginia Port Authority, or the Virginia Department for Aviation. This makes the final decision on determining about whether or not to move a USP to the next stage for detailed screening. We further observe that governments with limited technical capacities typically require that the USP proponent develop the projects, whereas governments with greater technical capacity take a more active role in project development. In the majority of the countries that rely on the USP proponent to develop the project, we see India, the Philippines, Kenya, Tanzania, and Senegal. Public officials cite a lack of public sector capacity, both technical and financial, as the main constraints to develop projects. Some public officials also believe that the studies would be conducted faster and at a higher level of quality if the USP proponent developed them. Some of these countries require the USP proponent to develop only the relevant feasibility studies, but also the procurement document. Government with greater PP maturity either conduct project development themselves or allow the USP proponent to develop specific studies while the public agency oversees the process. In Virginia, for example, and in South Africa, it's common that the public agency is responsible for the project development, but it can engage with the USP proponent. In Chile, The Ministry of Public Works actively oversees and guides the USP proponent, while the latter develop the required studies. The experience review did not find instances in which the public agency fully developed a USP project with limited or non-involvement of a USP proponent. May I take this opportunity to hand in to my colleague Ismail to continue with our experience reviews.
All right, thank you, Richard. I'll pick up from there to provide additional experiences. In Indonesia, the government identified several shortcomings in the direct negotiation of USPs with potential independent power producers, leading to unbalanced contract terms that eventually required renegotiations. In South Africa, the government terminated a PPP contract for an information technology system that started as a USP and was directly negotiated. So from this we pick that there are indications that USP projects in which the USP proponent developed the feasibility studies and the PPP contract documentation led to more renegotiations. We have observation from public officials in Virginia, for example, who found that allowing the USP proponent to develop the project scope put them in a weak negotiating position for a certain project, I-495 Hot Lanes project. Now, this tells us that limiting the involvement of the USP proponent in the project development allows the public agents to, one, define the project according to its objectives and strengthens its negotiating positions. Two, create equal bidding conditions during competitive tender. And three, build the long-term capacity required to develop high-quality projects. Another observation or experience we came across is that in Peru and Chile, the public agents may negotiate directly with the USP proponent if no competing bidders express interest. Similarly, in South Africa, a market test determines whether other firms are interested in the project, after which the public agents can negotiate directly with the USP proponent if there is no response from competing bids. Therefore, we see that most governments that were examined in this review competitively tender USP projects. Directly negotiated USPs often struggle with controversies, primarily over transparency and accountability, which result in delays in implementation. Another observation is competitively tendering USPs can help to strengthen the negotiating position of the public agents and ensure value for money. Indeed, in a 2011 study in the United States, found that 70% of private entities preferred participating in a competitive tender versus directly negotiating a USP. Another observation is that most competitive tenders that provide the USP proponent with the right to match attract few or no competing bidders. A bonus mechanism, however, may not necessarily distort competition if bonuses represent small percentages of bidding criteria. Most USP frameworks feature an incentive mechanism for the USP proponent during the competitive tender process. The right to match is the most common incentive mechanism used in India, the Philippines, Peru, Colombia, Jamaica, and Italy. The bonus mechanism is used in Chile, Colombia, South Korea. A less common mechanism is the automatic admission of the USP proponent to the final bidding round, also known as the final offer stage, featured in South Africa and Philippines. Most governments, including South Africa, do not offer the USP proponent any incentive over competing bidders. In the United States, a 2011 study found that none of the 22 states with a USP framework provided incentive mechanisms. These countries have found that incentive mechanisms encourage USPs for opportunistic motivations, and that quality USPs can still be encouraged with the reimbursement of costs incurred in the development of any feasibility studies. This approach finds support among private entities, most of which oppose incentive mechanisms during procurement. Countries that allow the right to match, including Italy, Philippines, Colombia, and Peru, have struggled to create competition during procurement. Numerous government agencies have actively voiced their concerns with the right to match mechanism. In Italy, which has had a USP framework since 1998 and introduced the right to match in 2002, the right to match mechanism has been heavily criticized by both Italians and by the European Union for violating the principle of equal treatment of bidders. Governments such as those of Chile and South Korea have found that the bonus mechanism may still allow for competition. In South Korea, the USP proponent can receive a bonus of up to 10% if its proposal is not amended by the public agency, and a bonus of up to 5% if the proposal is amended. In Chile, which has used the bonus mechanism since 1992, it appears that bonuses have not significantly distorted competition. Another observation is that to create sufficient market interest, public agencies must offer sufficient time for competing bidders to develop their bids. In Italy, the USP framework specifies that competing bidders must be given a minimum of 52 days to prepare a project. In Colombia, competitive bidders have from 1 to 6 months to express their interest in the project. In Guam, bidders have 60 days. In Philippines, they have 60 working days for competing bidders to submit a competing proposal. Another experience is that in Colombia, highway concessionaires have submitted USP proposals for projects that in many cases are simply extensions of ongoing highway concessions. When procured, these projects attracted no competing bidders, in part because the concessionaires benefited from economies of scale and in-depth knowledge of demand conditions. Therefore, we see that when a USP proponent owns land required for the project, proposes the use of its proprietary technology, or possesses adjacent concessions, its strategic advantage is difficult to overcome. In these cases, the public agency may either restructure the project to reduce the USP proponent's strategic advantage or conduct benchmarking exercises before directly negotiating with the USP proponent. Having gone through all that experience review for the different countries of the world, we see that although countries' experiences with USPs vary, governments typically face a common set of challenges in managing and implementing USPs. The following policy interventions have been successfully used to address challenges in USPs, and we recommend them to the PPP unit to use in the development for handling USPs. I am going to name half of them. My colleague will name the remainder, and then we conclude our presentation.
It's okay, Ismail, proceed.
The first recommendation the group observed is the PPP unit should ensure centralizing the USP submission process to to enable development of public sector capacity in PPPs in one location. Number 2, the PPU unit should establish a dedicated time window for USP submissions to prevent public officials from being distracted from their priorities and create certainty for USP proponents. Number 3, the PPP unit should institute a USP review fee that may deter opportunistic and low-quality USPs and encourage USP proponents to meet submission requirements. Number 4, the PPP unit can decide not to accept USPs, which allows it to avoid the challenges resulting from USPs. Governments that employ this strategy often work with multilaterals or external advisors to identify, develop, and implement publicly initiated projects. The PPP unit can allow USPs to seek assistance from multilaterals or external advisors to develop the project at an early stage, thereby leveling the playing field for a competitive tender. Number 6, use of a two-stage procedure in bid evaluation to limit the use of public and private sector resources to only those USPs that have shown to provide value to the public agents. The PPP unit should ensure, that is number 7, that contracting authorities put in place clear evaluation criteria, which in addition ensures evaluation of value for money of the PPP. The PPP unit should accept USP proposals or projects which align with the public sector's overall objectives, priorities, and plans. The PPP unit should clearly assign responsibilities for bid evaluation to the different government MDAs. Number 10, in the case of some projects, the PPP unit can accept USPs to be submitted and developed by project developers who would subsequently be given an equity stake in the project entity. In this way, the majority of the work can still be competitively tendered, but the project developer takes the lead in structuring the project and PPP transactions, as well as in managing the interfaces among the project components. Number 11, the PPP unit should prohibit direct negotiation of PPPs, rather provide for competitive procurement of PPPs to enable fair market price and value for money. At this juncture, I would like to pass on to my colleague to wind up the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Ismail. I'm on number 12 of one of the recommendations. That is, the PP unit should seek other ways to generate and utilize private sector innovations, ranging from the use of output-based specifications in the PP, procurements to requests for information or ideas competition. 13, we came up with that the PP unit allows USPs to either develop the project at an early stage or allow the USP proponent to contribute to the development of the project, maintaining a stronger guidance or oversight role. This allows the government to utilize USPs to capture creative ideas while still ensuring that they are competitively tendered. We further said 14 that the PP unit only approves innovative USPs that show unique public benefit and the exceptional ability of the US proponent to deliver the projects, because other projects may still be good project ideas. Government may decide to develop them as a non-USPs. Only truly innovative and unique proposals therefore receive exceptional treatment. 15. The PPU unit considers allowing sufficient time during bidding process to create equal bidding conditions. We further believe that the PPU unit ensures that the contracting authorities adopt a leading role in scoping and structuring both the project and the PPE contract, such that it serves not only the public interest but also the market interest required for a competitive tender. 17. The PPE unit considers setting minimum submission requirements with thresholds for the quality of a USP with adequate evaluation criteria to enable the USPs that are aligned with public goals. 18. The PPE unit proposes a policy which ensures that the public sector provides land required for the PP project or prohibits PPs from concessionaires that have adjacent concessions to give strategic advantage to the government during the negotiation. Having come up with those recommendations, we also went further to look at the references that we used for coming up with this thing, and basically we used the Public-Private Partnership Act 2015, that's the laws of Uganda. We also looked at the policy guidelines for managing unsolicited proposals in infrastructure projects, that is World Bank Group. With that, we come to the end of our presentation. Now I take it back to my colleague Ismail.
Thank you so much. Once again, we are a group of two students of UMI, MBA. My name is Ismail Kyaze, and my colleague
is Richard Esiat Okurut.
Thank you so much. We pray for favor from God to pass this presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome.